kind of a mix of a couple things. So I always kept a journal or a notebook, a diary. I don't want to call it that. But yeah, throughout high school, I pretty much wrote poems. I kept everything to myself, though. I was pretty quiet about everything. I was shy. I was a dancer growing up, so my expression came through my body and less through my voice. And then when I was 23, I actually had a tumor in my throat. Yeah, it was fairly large, aggressive tumor. And it wasn't cancer, but my best friend, when I found out about everything, was like, oh, well, you got that tumor because you swallow everything you ever want to say. And I was like, oh, okay then. And I really took that to heart. And he had looked up this spoken word workshop that was happening at Oakland by this wonderful poet, Andrea Thompson, and was like, hey, why don't you check this out? Maybe get over your fear of saying your stuff out loud now that this is happening. So in that summer, the day of, I signed up for the workshop, and it was like a 6-week kind of course. And Andrea Thompson was phenomenal, and she was such a great, comfortable person to walk into a room with and be like, okay, here's my work that I'm terrified of reading out loud. And she was like very supportive. The class was very supportive. She brought us to an open mic at the end of the 6 weeks, and I ended up at Toronto Poetry Slam by myself one night right before my surgery. And I did a sacrifice poem, which is the poem that calibrates the slam it's before the slam. And I ended up just getting such a great reception that after my surgery and I had healed, I just started going back to the slam. And that was the end of 2013, about November 2013. And then in 2014, I went for the team, and I ended up making it on the team. And we did a bunch of poems. We ended up in Oakland at the National Poetry Slam, which is where explaining my depression to my mother. We made the semifinals, which was a big deal for a Canadian team, so we were already excited. And that was the first time I had told my team that poem in the hotel room that day, did it on stage that night, panicked, and had that performance. And then kind of just put it out of my mind. Like, we were really happy with what we did. And a couple months later, Button messaged me like, hey, do you mind if we post this? Can you give us permission? And I didn't really remember the performance, so I thought, yeah, sure, why not? How bad could it be, right? And then I watched it like this. I was like, oh no, it's that bad. But that was the true turning point where, my family didn't know what I was going through with depression and stuff. So in a lot of ways, it's like the tumor, getting over that hump really, or taking it out really freed up my voice. And yes, it's been a whirlwind a couple of years. You know what? The next morning, I would say, I had this moment. I was in my hotel room in Oakland, and all my team members had gone and got their own breakfast. We were out of the competition, so everyone was relaxed and just like, okay, we don't have to practice anymore. And so everyone was scattered, and I had called my mom because my mom had never heard this poem at that point. And I was like, hey, Mom, I did this poem last night. It was wild. The scores were really high. The reception in the audience was incredible. All these poets I love said really amazing things to me. And I have the weirdest feeling I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. And she started laughing. And she was like, oh, sounds like you're about to get a tattoo. And so I did. I went and got a crescent moon tattooed. And because my grandmother always says this thing to me, she says, what you see is what you get, but that's not all there is. So it's a little bit like you can see the crescent moon, knowing there's still a full moon there. And that ends up being the opening quote in this book, which is beautiful. I honestly find communication to be the answer. The more you talk about it, the more someone else understands you, the more you understand even what you're saying. That whole poem is about me explaining to my mom everything that's going on, but ultimately me saying to her, just because I can tell you what's happening doesn't mean I understand why it's happening. And I think that's a real breakthrough moment, when you have that moment within yourself, or whatever the thing is that you struggle with, is okay, I'm struggling, but I don't need to understand why. I just need to admit that I am and navigate through that a little bit better. And I think that speaking out for me that was my ultimate struggle, saying, hey, I'm not okay. My big breakdown actually, my personal big breakdown with my family was, one day I had to call my mom and be like, Mama, I don't think I've left my house in 3 weeks. I'm having a very hard time right now. And she was like, what do you mean? And obviously I had struggled since high school, but it was that very real, okay, I can't pretend I'm okay. Like, you know, you can get through that only so long until you hit that wall of like, if you don't reach out, you just like destruct inward, and I couldn't do that anymore. So I think like my big lesson and what I really like want the book to illustrate to people is that just talk about it, like share. Communication is the first step we have to connecting with each other, whether that's physical or verbal, you know. Sometimes even just showing someone you're not okay, like crying in front of people is a big deal, you know, but sometimes that's what it takes for someone to realize, okay, you're telling me you're not okay, but I need to see it. And I think that's in a strange way why the poem or the video like does resonate, because the words are really gelling with the physicality of the message in that video. So it's so authentic that you're like, okay, I've seen people break down before. That's what it looks like, and you're almost more compelled to listen when, you know what I mean? You understand that person doesn't get it either. You know, that empathy is there. So I think it's been, spoken word in general, poetry in general, has been a huge outlet for healing. The videos, they have this really great breathing quality to them. Like, I can give you a poem right in front of you and present it and create that atmosphere around it. But with the book, what I liked was I really intentionally could tell a full story. It wasn't so much of a zoom in on a scenario or a scene or a snapshot. It was like, okay, let me paint you a picture of what life is like from this side. And I think it's important to show depression and anxiety and mental illness, panic disorder, all these things. I think it's important to show it in the mundane as much as in those high emotional states. You know, like, so I think the book really does a nice job of bridging the spectrum of those moments you see in the poems on videos versus the ones where you're just kind of on the TTC sitting, and you'll read a book, like in the book there's a poem about me being on the subway, you know, and I kind of like that intimate quietness, you know, where it's in your head, and me reading it out loud really doesn't have the same effect as you would reading it in your head and imagining me writing it exactly that way. Yeah. It makes me feel grateful, really. It really makes me feel grateful. It makes me feel, honestly, like understood in this way that I can't, it's so intangible because I can't just walk up to a stranger most of the time and be like, you get me. But someone will come up to me and be like, oh, I saw your poem. And I'm like, you get me. And it's like, I have this quiet kind of acknowledgement of like, yes, we don't need to talk about all of this stuff and try to explain to each other, oh, what do you go through? Is it like this? Is it like that? We're both just kind of like, yeah, it's rough. And there's actually something that moves me like to no end is parents who send me messages saying, thank you so much for this. Now I can talk to my child, or I'm going to get help. Or people being like, oh, thank you for letting me show this video to my parents, and now I'm going to see a counselor. And that is, like, to me, that's the whole point of all this, right? And really and truly, that video is what started my journey of getting help and seeing doctors and actually talking about all of this. So it's amazing and really like moving to know that there are people that had very similar journeys with me on the other side of, you know, the kind of glass or the window, the two-sided glass, where it's like we're living both the same journey of admitting you have a problem, getting the help, having to tell all these people in your life, hey, this is what it's actually like. You know, I'm sorry I didn't come to your birthday party, but I couldn't breathe in my doorway for 45 minutes because I couldn't walk outside of the door. I don't know why, you know, like it's nice to be able to say, okay, that's something that isn't only happening to me. Where before this I thought I must be the only person in the world. Like nobody gets me. And not in a cool, like artsy way, in a like, oh, I'm never going to be truly understood. And like, it's funny to think that I used to think that I was the only person that felt like this. And now it's like, every day I get messages from people being like, how did you know what's happening in my head? And I was like, okay, yes. It's really made me feel like we're all connected more. It's so funny. People are always saying, you know, social media, the internet, it's breaking down all the connections, where I've had the exact opposite experience. So I'm not really anything but a catalyst. Like the video, maybe someone showed it to their friend, now their friend, and that person have a better relationship. And like, I don't want to take the credit for that happening, but I'm so grateful that all of this struggle could be a lesson or could benefit someone else and not have to go through the struggle and the like alienation that I felt, being like, okay, nobody gets me. There's no language for mental health in my family. There was no like, I'm depressed. It was like, I don't want to go to school. Why? I don't know. Why? I'm scared. Why? Like, you know, there was no real answer. And so I think it's nice. I'm glad that I could give people like, hey, there's no real answer, and that's okay. Tell your parents that. Or tell your children that, or whoever you need to tell, your best friend.